sort of a dismal year, according to everybody who gets polled on the subject. You might be wondering what would be an optimistic, useful way to go into 2022. How can we reboot our minds and get us in the right frame to really take on the challenges of the coming year? And I'm going to help you do that. And I'm going to use a little thing I like to call the whiteboard. And let me tell you where this all started. Some of you know I keep complaining that I continuously have the same type of problem no matter where I live or what house, which is a continuous stream of, no pun intended, water-related problems. Now, they don't seem to be related to construction, they're not any kind of common thing that's happening. For example, the town's connection to me had a leak. It wasn't my fault. The town fixed it. An old pump that was 30 years old gave up its useful life in a well and just broke. So the whole number of things that don't have anything in common. And I was thinking to myself, how can it possibly be in this reality that I have this same problem for decades, just nonstop, wherever I live? It's like one after another. And other people have other themes. I'm going to call it a theme. So I have this water leak theme that follows me wherever I go. Other people have a theme of certain relationship patterns they run into, or certain specific kinds of bad luck. And I don't have any of that. So they don't have any of my water theme. I don't have any of their theme. And what would explain that? And I'm going to give you a few views of the world that explain that. And you get to pick which one you like. And one of the lessons here is that they all work. Are you ready for this? All right. So here are some different views of the world. And as you're going into 2022, if you're aware of them, you'll be better equipped because you can pick the one that works best. Now, this starts with the assumption that the human brain is not evolved or designed, whichever you prefer, to understand reality. There's no reason to believe it would be. In fact, if reality were as big as a beach ball, what would make us think that we understand more than, let's say, a BB-sized percentage of it? There's no reason to think that. And in fact, when we look at our own past, we see how much smarter we get all the time. There's no reason to think we sort of reached the pinnacle of our smartness. And there's no reason to think that when we do, we'll have anywhere near an accurate idea of this thing we call reality. Not really much chance of that at all. And in fact, we all walk around in different realities if you consider just the major religions. If somebody is walking around in a, let's say, Islamic reality, meaning that their view of the reality they're in contains a certain kind of a God and situation, that's very different than the atheist or the Christian or the Buddhist. These are very different realities because what you feel and think about your reality is your reality for all practical purposes. So here's just a tour of the realities that you see all the time. We'll say one is the prayer reality or the God reality, whatever you like. And it's the idea that you might be able to guide reality or guide your future, if you will, by praying, or more generally, by adhering to certain religious practices. Now, do people who do this seem to have a good outcome? Actually, they do. It turns out there's a pretty high correlation between believing that the prayer God model is the correct view of the world. These people do seem to have better outcomes. Now, could be correlation, could be causation. We're not going to talk about that yet. It's just a different view of the world. Then there's the just physics crowd, the people who say it's just the laws of physics, stuff is bumping into other stuff, doesn't have much to do with anything else. And And then there's what I call the Dr. Richard Wiseman view of things, which I learned a few years ago. So Dr. Richard Wiseman did some trials, some tests on people, and determined, or at least this is his hypothesis, is that the people who could be trained to expect luck actually noticed more opportunities. So expecting luck tunes your brain to spot luck. Now I'm shortening and summarizing and paraphrasing his body of work, so I may be missing some nuance. But the basic idea is that you can tune your brain to notice things. Now, is that a radical idea? Did you really need to do any science to know that you can tune your brain to notice things? Let me ask you this. Have you ever had a situation where a friend of yours got a certain car, or just somebody you know, and because they got that car, you started noticing that model car everywhere, right? You've all had that experience. Simply the very experience of just having somebody close to you get a certain model of vehicle that's a little uncommon completely tunes your brain and instantly to notice them everywhere. So is it any accident that the people who expect luck, in other words, the optimists, if they expect luck, is it any coincidence that they notice it? No, because we know in a variety of ways you can tune your brain to notice the things that you want it to notice. Now, you could just put a focus on things. Whatever you're talking about, focusing on, that's what you notice. All right? So that's one view of the world. Now, you've also heard of affirmations, the idea that you could somehow steer your fate in some magical way that's hard to explain by just repeating something such as, I, Scott Adams, will be a #1 best-selling author, which is one I actually did before I became a #1 best-selling author. Coincidence or causation? We're not talking about that. So that's not the topic yet. It's just one way to see the world. Does it work? Hard to know. I don't know if there's any way to know. But I can tell you that people have the sensation that it works. In other words, their subjective reality, and this would include me, my subjective reality is that it works. Could I prove it? I doubt it. Would any science support it? I don't know. Maybe not beyond the Wiseman idea of tuning your brain to notice things. Now, you've heard of the law of attraction, similar thing to affirmations, the power of positive thinking. The Power of Positive Thinking, huge best-selling book from years ago. The idea that you could just think positively and somehow that would translate into the real world through people responding to you or maybe something else, and somehow you could get a better outcome just by positivity. Now, those things always existed in the realm of magical thinking. Can we agree? That if you talk to a skeptic, if you talk to the just physics people, they say, there's no mechanism for any of that to work. There's sort of an air gap. There's no physics that gets the stuff out of your head and into the real world. Or is there? Enter the simulation theory. Elon Musk being a famous proponent of it. I'm another one, less famous, but just as enthusiastic about the idea that we live in a simulation. Now, we would not know the nature of this simulation, but we would have reason to believe that if you change your perceptions, focus them, change your filters, change what matters to you, change what you expect, change your intentions, all words around the same things. Change your prayers, change your expectations. If you were to do those things, could they influence the simulation? Or would it just look like it was happening? Don't know. It's not the question right now. So the idea, simply as a competing idea for how to describe reality, is that if you expect luck, it's not just that you notice it. That's a different idea. In this model, expecting luck via affirmations, which would be a part of positivity, generally speaking, the law of attraction, the power of positive thinking, that all of these are ways to focus expectations, or you could call it intentions. And once you focus them, you get your luck. But back to my original point, why is it that people have themes in their life? Why do I always have leaks, water problems wherever I live all the time, but other people don't? And why do they have problems that repeat and repeat and repeat for reasons that you can't see any causation? Well, one thing that those things have in common is everywhere I go, I expect water leaks if I own it. Before the first water leak I ever had, the first time I owned property, because I'd had some rentals that had some water leaks, when I was a renter. And when I bought one, I thought, man, what would be the biggest problem I could possibly have? And then I had it. And then the next time, I think, God, I know, I'd hate to have that twice, because how bad would that be to have the biggest problem in the world twice? And then I did. So one way to explain all of this is that whether you're putting negative or positive expectations into the universe, or just into your mind, or just into your subjective experience, that you're going to get what you put out. And that there's a direct correlation between whether you're thinking positively and how your experience is, and whether you're thinking negatively. So the only thing I would put out there is don't get locked into imagining there's only one filter on the world. You can reframe your experience to the one that predicts best or gives you the best life. If, for example, you're one of the people who has been praying and you're quite happy with it, and it seems to be giving you good results, maybe it is. Maybe that's exactly what's happening. Keep doing that. That's working. But if you would rather have, let's say, something more like a scientific-y explanation of why your positivity seems to be helping, you could use Dr. Weissman's idea that you're simply tuning your brain in a very ordinary way that we can all demonstrate 100 different ways is easy to do. And of course, you're going to see more luck opportunities. And so why wouldn't that cause you more luck? But if you want to get a little bit more, let's say, speculative, if you wanted to be a little bit more optimistic, if you wanted to see if you could make 2022 off the hook, you're not limited to all of these worldviews. You could take the worldview that you can put your intention out there and it will change your actual environment. Now, if we are nothing but a physical world, just like the scientists say, that's not going to work, except in the limited way that you'll notice more opportunities, which could be very good. Don't want to minimize that. But it won't work like magic, right? However, if we live in a simulation, and the argument for the simulation is that if anybody builds one, they're not going to stop at one. So there should be far more simulations who believe they're real than real original species. So the odds are far and away that this model is true. And if it's true, it would explain why our intentions that we put into it are exactly what we get out. You want to hear another one? What was the biggest fear about the mandates and restrictions of COVID in 2021? What did we obsess on? Is the government going to increase our mandates? Is the virus going to mutate? Exactly what happened in the world were all the intentions we put into it. Could it be that they were just good ideas and therefore there's nothing magical about it? They were just good ideas. Of course, you worry about the variant. Of course you worry about government taking too much control. But ask yourself, is it a coincidence we got what all of us put into it in terms of our worst fears and expectations? I would just want you to be open to the possibility that we can intend ourselves a 2022 that's just crazy good. Won't be for everybody. It doesn't work that way. But I think we have come to the point in civilization where we've seen so many things that we thought were absolutely probably true turn out not to be true. We've seen Yanni and Laurel. We've seen in a million different ways, a lot of it started with the Trump experience, that there's no such thing as a fact anymore. There's no such thing as confidence in science. There's no data we trust. Even when we have the same data, we interpret it differently. We understand at a far deeper level right now that we're living in a deeply, deeply subjective experience in a way that we never really fully appreciated. Yes, everybody knew they were having their own little experience, but not at the level we understand it today. It's completely different. And that's when you open yourselves up to the possibility that you're putting your intentions into reality, whether that reality is imagined, and it's the one you're going to experience, or real, if that even means anything. I'm not sure it matters. It might also not matter if it's causal. It might be just good enough that your experience seems to benefit from it. So even causation may not mean the same thing if you're in the simulation. And the simulation does explain almost, or really, I think, everything that we experience. Does it make it true? Doesn't matter, because we don't have access to truth. If we could check it, that'd be great, because I'd want to check it too. But you can't check it. You can't check any of these. You can be really sure, and you can call your preference, and you can live with it, and you can make it work. These are all good methods, by the way. I wouldn't say that one is worse than the others. The only one that's limited is the physics-only people. They do at least take off the table the possibility that there's something about reality that they don't understand and could be useful. I think that the physics-only people take that option off the table. And one imagines that that could cause a difference in their outcomes. And so one thing that you could do to test this is you could find the people who say, no, there's nothing to the world but cause and effect. We're nothing but particles bumping into each other. And then see how they do. Compare them to the people who maybe are just as smart, let's say just as well trained in engineering or science, but in addition to having that view, are open to the simulation and with it, the fact that your intentions can change your experience. Just compare those two groups. The people who think there's nothing else but particles bumping, and the people who think their intentions and their positivity can change their experience, and then just measure their outcomes after 20 years. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your positive message for the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022. To summarize, don't assume that you can't make your reality better. If not in some real sense, certainly in a subjective sense. Remember, you are not the result of other people's actions. You're not the victim of them. You're the author of your reality. If somebody does something that makes you really mad, you have the option of not being mad. Doesn't feel like it, does it? But you do. And the more times you remind yourself that that horrible feeling you're having is actually not the only feeling you could be having under exactly the same situation. You just have to remind yourself that there's not one way to see the world. You're not stuck in a physical world if you don't want to be. You can manage your intentions by just managing what I call your shelf space, which is the amount of time you focus on good things versus bad things. If you focus on all the bad, you might attract it. That's one theory. I'm not saying that's true. Or you might focus on it more, and that's going to cause your brain to be rewired to notice more of it. So if you spend your time consuming negative content, you should expect to have a less good experience. If tonight you were thinking, I think I'll watch a nice crime drama in which bad things happen to people, don't expect good things to happen to you at the same rate as people who decided that a good form of entertainment would be comedy or music, for example. Just assume that everything that's going in is changing your filters. And it's going to change your filters for you if you don't do the changing yourself. So if you just see yourself as a tuning device that can either be tuned randomly or it can be tuned intentionally, tune it intentionally. That's the idea of talent stacks, is to intentionally tune your talents so you can do a variety of things. And this is a technique for tuning your brain to be more efficient. So when I talk about being the author of the simulation, you being the author of your subjective experience, this is what I mean. Tuning the brain to be more receptive to the good stuff and less receptive to the bad stuff. And it doesn't require anything harder than how much time you spend thinking about each. Now you say to yourself, but Scott, I can't control my thoughts. Yes, you can. You can control your thoughts, but you have to do it indirectly. Here's how I controlled my thoughts yesterday. Feeling like I was having a lot of bad luck and everything was sort of going against me. Then I realized that it had been raining for days and I'd been trapped indoors with construction noise for 8 hours a day. And so the first time that the sun came out, I walked outside and within 1 block of my home realized I didn't have any problems. And it was just sunshine. I retuned my brain by bringing my body outside. You could also retune your brain by exercise. See, it's indirect, but it works every time. If you're having, let me give you the best reframe you've ever had. You ready? Here's one to take into the next year. When you have stress, the common way to think of that is as a problem, almost like a health problem. Well, really, it is a health problem. And something that's this horrible thing. Do you know what I think of when I have stress? I think, today's a day I'm really going to exercise well. Stress is your body's way of telling you you haven't exercised enough today. Now, is that oversimplifying? Yes, that's what a frame does. It's an oversimplification that's useful. It's something you tell yourself to put yourself in a completely different frame of mind. Stress, after work, you come home full of stress, how far are you going to run that day if you're a runner or bike or whatever it is you do? How much are you going to lift? More, right? And will it work? Will it burn your stress off? Yeah, every time. It works every time. So reframe your stress as haven't worked out enough. How about if you can't sleep? Have trouble sleeping? I'll reframe that too. You didn't work out enough. Or you didn't work enough. Yeah. You don't have a problem sleeping. You have a problem of not working hard enough. Or working out hard enough. Do you have a problem with eating? No, you don't. You have a problem with your system. Your system for diet is defective. You don't have a problem with eating. You don't love food too much. It's true you love food, but if you reframe it as, wait a minute, my system for getting food into me is defective. So what do I do to change the system? You could read my book, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, for more about that. So as 2022 comes at us, it is time to take ourselves out of negativity mode, because the pandemic has done that to us. And we did it to ourselves. And I think I'm one of the biggest problems, because I talk about the pandemic a lot. You've seen a lot of people say, Scott, if you stop talking about it, it will cease to be a problem. And my rational brain says, that's not how it works. Problems don't go away because you stop talking about them. But that's not the only part of my brain. There's also this part. And part of it says, what if we stopped talking about it? What if we filled the shelf space? What if we made everything else our priority for a while? Would it go away? At least in our subjective experience, it would. I mean, you still have to remember to wear a mask until they tell you to, you're okay, whatever. But your subjective experience would improve right away. And maybe, you can't rule it out, you might change the world. And so, I leave you with this optimistic message for 2022. I do actually believe that 2022 is going to be off the hook. Like, really, really fun. And of course we'll have our tragedies. Of course we'll have our challenges. Those come along with the game. But we're coming off 2 bad years, and we've got some energy to burn. And we're ready to go. So, Happy New Year to all of you.